Last night, Moscow suffered one of the most egregious terrorist attacks of any nation that has suffered in many years, maybe more than a decade. The Crocus City Hall, where there was a concert going on, was attacked by apparently up to 5 armed gunmen who came in and literally just started slaughtering people for just random. Some of the scenes were horrible. Some of the video has been out there. We won't show it here, but it literally showed them just mowing down whoever was in front of them. It was egregious, kind of violent activity. Now today, now that the sun has come up and Russia has been able to ascertain a little bit more what's going on there, as it turns out, they have actually captured at least 4 of the assailants, and it's unclear if they got that 5th one or if there even was a 5th one. But they definitely have 4 people in their custody. We're going to talk about, and we're actually going to show some of the video of the interrogation of one of those in a minute, because it's very telling. I think more so than anything else can imagine. Now, of course, as you might guess, statements of support and sorrow and grief have been pouring in from literally around the world to Russia because of this heinous attack. And it hasn't mattered to United States, UK, European Union, as well as their allies, China, whatever. It really, no matter what, everybody has been saying this is a terrible thing. And regardless of the war that's going on between Russia and Ukraine, a terror attack against an outright civilian target is beyond the pale for everyone. And the United States is supporting the theory that it was ISIS, an ISIS affiliate called ISIS-K, ISIS Khorasan, which actually came out of Afghanistan originally, when there was ironically a battle between the Taliban and ISIS-K, and still to this day still goes on in that country there. Many others have been quick to say the same thing. Yes, this has all the hallmarks of an ISIS attack here. But of course, the many in Russia are going to first look to Kiev, and they think that this is actually a Ukrainian operation. And it's just unclear at this point. As you might guess, anytime in the immediate aftermath, it's very unclear. But some things just aren't lining up. And one of the reasons we have this channel, and I tell you all the time, we're unintimidated and uncompromised to tell the truth no matter what it is. So we're going to give you the best estimate we have now. Still, things are very much in flux and very much, changing by the minute as new information comes to light, et cetera. And you have to try and sift through the disinformation and the misinformation, and everybody's got their own angle. We're going to try to cut through some of this to show you some things that at least are concerning to me here in terms of trying to figure out who did this. Now, first of all, I want to go to what Putin said today, because just a very short period of time ago, he finally came on to address the nation, and here's a few of his comments.
All the orchestrators, all those who are responsible for this crime will inevitably be found responsible. They will pay. We will identify everyone who stands behind these terrorists, and they will pay. This is a strike against Russia. We know what terrorist threat means, and we expect that other nations that share our pain will cooperate with us, and we will stand united against this common enemy, international terrorism, no matter where it shows its ugly head. These terrorists have no nationality, and there's only one future for them: retribution and oblivion.
So those are pretty strong words. Retribution and oblivion are for the terrorists. And he went on to explain there, not just the individuals that pulled it off, but everyone who was responsible for them. He went to some lengths to talk about everyone who is related and associated with this will face some kind of retribution and oblivion. That was even stronger voice just last night, actually in the immediate aftermath of this, by hothead Dmitry Medvedev, former president of Russia, long been, given to emotional outbursts. So part of this is no surprise, but given the emotions that the Russian people are feeling right now, I assure you this is resonating with more people than we're comfortable with, where he wrote that terrorists understand only retaliatory terror. No trials or investigations will help if force is not countered by force, and deaths are not met with total executions of terrorists and repressions against their families, which is pretty chilling. If it established that these are terrorists of the Kiev regime, it is impossible to deal with them and their ideological inspires in any other way. All of them must be found and ruthlessly destroyed, including officials of the state that committed such an atrocity, death for death. So you had Putin with saying retribution and oblivion. You have Dmitry Medvedev saying death for death. So the Russians are very, very angry, like any country would be, like we definitely were after 9/11. Everybody wanted, immediate retribution. They wanted to find out who it was and punish them quickly and passionately, decisively. Obviously, you get the same thing going on in Israel right now with their October 7th attack, and you know how they responded to that. And those that have power with that, when they're hit with a terrorist attack, I don't know what the intent of whoever did this was. I don't know what any of these people did. It never makes sense if they think that they're going to cause the other side to back down or to go into their shell is counterintuitive. It's counterfactual. Every time it causes them to lash out even harder and to go more, not less than what they were doing before. And that is what I'm concerned about here, that in some respects, it may not matter what actually happened. It's only going to matter what Russia believes happened. And the actions that they take, there's a very large range of things that are possible here that are very concerning. But let's look a little bit more at what some of the claims are about, especially from first from the West, about what they say this was, and then what some other investigations are starting to reveal here. Now, first of all, as I said last night in our immediate response to this, on the March 7th and 8th, the United States posted this on their official website of the embassy in Russia, where they specifically said there is a real danger of terrorist activity of violent extremists in Moscow, and specifically said anywhere with large crowds like a concert. And of course, that's exactly what happened. Now, many in Russia are already pointing to this and saying, see, America knew of this. They had advance notice of it. So they're somehow complicit. The United States, to the contrary, is saying we did know about that there was a real problem here, and we actually told Russia what our intelligence said, because they say, hey, this is another one of those that extends beyond our disagreement with you on the war, but in a terrorist strike, we're going to actually give you information. And Putin actually in public said that, oh, that's just America trying to scare us. So he didn't give it apparently much credibility. So there's that issue also, that this is not something we knew about and was secret. We actually told the Russian government, hey, this is some intelligence we have. You need to be paying attention to this. So now then the people are saying in the West are saying, well, it turns out it was Muslim extremists. It was ISIS. It's one of our mutual enemies. ISIS-K did this. And we had this, was on CNN last night. Wes Clark was asked, is it ISIS or could it possibly have been Ukraine? Here's how he addressed that.
Because I don't think the Ukrainians are going to go after a target like this. I think they'd go after oil refineries,
right,
radar sites, military targets. This is clearly a war crime. They wouldn't do it as much as they're angry at Russia, and as much as something like this would bring the war home to the people in Moscow who have been relatively supportive of Mr. Putin. But still, I think the Ukrainian government just wouldn't do this. There's no doubt about Ukrainians working against the Russians. There are attacks in Belgorod. There are Ukrainian agents penetrating Russia. There's drones coming in. The security in Russia is sort of out of balance, I would guess, from all of this. And as Jill said, Putin's trying to mobilize people and send them to the front. And so there's a lot going on there. But this has all the hallmarks of ISIS.
This has all the hallmarks of ISIS, he said there. But does it have all the hallmarks of ISIS? There was another on Deutsche Welle, actually, I think also last night, or maybe it was this morning, where he was asked, an expert in terrorism was asked, what do you think about the ISIS-K situation? Here's what he said.
These seem to be Tajik perpetrators of last night. Tajik perpetrators belonging to ISKP have been arrested several times in Europe, including in Germany since 2020. So ISKP is really the affiliate of the Islamic State global network that is not primarily focused on conquering territory, but focused on external attacks. There have been numerous attempts.
So there have, in fact, been numerous attacks by ISIS-K all over the place. But ISIS-K also took credit for the attack against the U.S. When we were trying to evacuate from the Kabul airport in August of 2021. They took credit for that bomb blast that killed 13 Americans and 170 Afghan civilians. They also took credit for an attack in Iran in January of this year, where I think 85 people were killed. So they took credit for it. So that group is definitely out there and operating in some of these areas. But the question is it classic ISIS-K is a separate issue? And that's something that needs to be analyzed here, because my experience of having fought in counterinsurgency wars and fighting against terrorists and against violent extremists in both Afghanistan and Iraq really shows that they have some commonalities here. Number one, they are believers in what they do. Number two, they are willing to sacrifice their lives for this. And a third thing, especially in what I saw so many of the times in the Taliban and in some of these other terrorist groups with Al-Qaeda or whatever, they were not motivated by money. They were motivated by ideology and religious fervor. And that's why you had so many willing to die in suicide bombs, and, wearing those suicide vests, etc. And they were not willing to be taken captive. I don't know how many times I remember, intelligence briefings that I got while I was, on these combat deployments of we were going after, some of these guys, and instead of being captured, they set off a suicide belt because they were not going to be captured alive. So let's take a look at what we know now about this particular case. Now, a friend of mine who has some connections to the intelligence community raised some serious questions here and says something just doesn't smell right to this, and it doesn't to me either. First of all, it turns out that these guys were Tajiks, as Hans Jakob there just said. They were Tajiks. They were in the country already, but they were caught actually trying to escape into to Ukraine, where, according to the Russians, there was a, quote, window open waiting for them on the other side. So that raises some bells. Why would they have been going into Ukraine as opposed to anywhere else they could have escaped out of, especially if they were Tajiks? They could have gone elsewhere. But the second one is that they were paid, or at least promised, 500,000 rubles. So they didn't do this out of any religious fervor. They did it for a lot of money. The second one is that the plan was developed by a third party. Oh, and you're going to hear this in one of the interrogation videos that's out there right now. A remarkable video that's you're going to find very compelling here in just a minute. But you'll see in this video that these guys were contacted by someone else via a Telegram channel. So it's like our Twitter, so to speak. And so they didn't know who these people were. They have no connection to it other than a voice and a text message situation. So this wasn't their fervor. This was someone else contacting them. And of course, it could be anybody on the other end of that line. So it's not at all clear who was actually doing this. The second was the planner was an anonymous imam's assistant who contacted them. So they claiming to be, someone on ISIS-K, a preacher that they apparently had been listening to. So they were very vulnerable and subject to be manipulated here easily. All surrendered when they were cornered here. Nobody had a suicide vest. So that's another thing that is not an earmark of an ISIS-K, like the one in Iran that I told you about. That was a suicide bomber that they sacrificed their lives in here. These guys all wanted money, and they were not prepared to lend their lives. And in fact, all surrendered as opposed to like fighting to the death or so. So these are not the hallmarks of somebody who's ideologically motivated. And if ISIS-K actually did this, one would ask, why did they not send their own people to do it, as somebody who was dedicated to this? And certainly they have the opportunity of those in Russia. They've got people that are able to get into nearly any place there. So that doesn't prove anything, but it does raise a lot of questions that things just don't seem to be lining up right now. It absolutely could be. You can make the argument that these ISIS believers were willing to use some dopes in Ukraine and Russia who had come in there, who were listening to them on Telegram channels. And so it was an easy target. That's plausible. And it could also be true. It could be exactly as said, but there are some things that just don't line up. Now, I'm going to show you this video here of the interrogation of one of the perpetrators here, and just come to your own conclusions here. Watch this.
За сколько денег?
Где-то 500 000.
Полмиллиона чего?
500 000 рублей.
От кого получал?
Еще не получал, половину получал.
Где получал?
По карту.
На карту переводил?
Да.
Где карта?
Карта бросали за все одежды, не успели
Потеряли.
влезть, да.
Где оружие брали?
Оружие они сам доставили.
Кто они?
Не знаю, по телеграмм написали без имя, без фамилии, без ничего.
А как тебя нашли? Ты сам их искал или они тебя нашли?
Нет, они меня написали.
А почему они именно тебе написали?
Не знаю, я слушал там уроки.
Ну как так? Тебе взяли, предложили просто так убивать людей? Просто так не предлагают никому убивать людей.
Нет, я в телеграмме урок учился.
Кто задержал вот этого
Урок.
человека?
Что в телеграме?
Урок слушал, да. Он проповеди слушал там.
Проповедника слушал?
Да.
И он на тебе написал?
Ее помощник мне написал.
Как помощника зовут?
Не знаю, без имя, без фамилии, без ничего мне написал. Только
Когда он тебе написал?
он где-то месяц назад.
Что он написал конкретно?
Он написал, короче, где-то 1 000 000 рублей обещал.
Что он, с чего начал? Что он тебе говорил? Что надо сделать? С чего начался разговор?
Просто поздоровался сначала. Потом мне предлагал, я согласился.
Что предлагал?
Деньги предлагал.
Деньги предлагал? За
Да.
что? Что предлагал?
За деньги предлагал, что такие дела сделал.
Какие дела? Конкретно что он тебе сказал?
Такие убийства.
Что, кого убить?
Вот на место все они скинули.
Они сказали конкретно, кого убивать?
Да, люди.
Каких?
Без разницы, короче, там дойдет, сказал. Делайте этого дела.
Заходите убивать?
Да.
So you can see there that this is not someone who was ideologically motivated. He was motivated by money. Now, he was listening to these sermons, so he probably apparently didn't have a problem with doing it. So that speaks to the depravity of the individual himself and all those who pull the triggers against concert goers. I mean, that's the same thing that happened in Israel, right? How horrible it was when those Hamas terrorists just slaughtered all the people who were at the outdoor concert. The parallels are pretty strong here, and they're equally heinous. That's one of the points to make here. But here's the problem with trying to ascertain who did it. They don't know who they were talking to. It literally could have been anyone in the world. It could have been someone masquerading as an imam. It could have been an imam. It could have been just like it's portrayed in the West. It could have been something more nefarious. The problem is we just don't know. Now, that's going to lead into what Russia does, because what Russia is probably not going to do is to say, well, it could be ISIS. It could be the Kiev regime. We just can't know, so we're not going to take any action. That's not going to happen. No nation is going to be hit like this with an egregious casualty toll like this. I think the last I saw was 135 were killed, 115 to maybe even more, 150 could have been wounded. It's not clear of the exact numbers. I'm sure that'll come out in the coming days, but it's egregious. And it was in Moscow, in the capital city, against an incredibly vulnerable target. And I assure you, because I've been reading a lot of the Russian news and some of their Telegram channels to kind of see what the flavor is, and it's exactly what you would expect. Lots of anger, everybody looking for somebody to pin it on right now. Nobody wants to wait a long time, and they're all looking for the government to do something about it. Just like we were on 9/11, people wanted some kind of retaliation and retribution right away, and we ended up finding it. We were in Afghanistan, went into Afghanistan within, what was it, like I guess less than a month, just a few weeks, and decisive action was taken of going against the Taliban in Afghanistan. And you know where that worked out after 2 decades later. This one, coming on the embers already of this big war that's been fighting on, is a big problem. Now, here's the complications for the Russians in ascertaining who did it. They already know that just in recent days alone, that the Ukraine side has been mounting attacks inside of Russia proper against a city called Belgorod, another civilian city. It's not a military target. It's just a civilian city that they've been going on to. So they've already have been accused, the Russians have already been accusing the Ukrainian side of random shelling of civilian areas in the war, of sending people in that they're claiming are Russian patriots that are actually trying to take back their land. Of course, that's an absurd statement that a handful of Russians are going to actually be able to take any terrain. It's just that they can make some demonstrations to make life awful for Putin and to show them that there's pain to go inside. I mean, that's clearly the most that they could hope for in conducting these operations, which definitely did come from the Ukraine side of the border. So that part is true. There's also been lots of drone attacks against infrastructure, oil refineries throughout Russia. There have been agents on the ground, which Wes Clark mentioned. So there already are, for sure, lots of Ukrainian activity inside of Russia, which, is making their population unhappy. Now, of course, many in the West will say, sucks to be them, they shouldn't have been going into war. I'm not going to discuss that right now. All I'm telling you here is what it looks like from the Russian side, because we're trying to figure out what could come next. Now, there was a speech ironically given just days before this happened by Russia, by Vladimir Putin, to the FSB, which is the old KGB. Apparently, he annually gives a speech to that group. He used to be an agent in there, as is well known now. And it's very interesting what he said, because he's going to tell you in this clip we're about to show what he believed had been going on already. And I think he was talking about some of this Belgorod issues, but what he is saying about the collusion of the West and Ukraine relating to terrorist activity against Russia. Check this out.
Moreover, maintaining close collaboration with the local authorities is crucial. I would like to note at this point that at one time the West actively used various cross-border radical and terrorist groups and, in part, encouraged their aggression against Russia. Predictably, the neo-Nazi Kiev regime has also switched to terrorist tactics, with similar external support and often under direct instructions. This includes the shelling of peaceful cities, assaults on government officials and public figures, and attempts to recruit perpetrators of subversive and terrorist attacks targeting critical infrastructure and public spaces in Russia.
Public spaces in Russia. Days before this attack happened, he said that Ukraine, under instructions from the West, was the implication there, had been doing terrorist activities. He was also referred to personnel and people and figures. He was probably referring to the daughter of a prominent Russian figure, and I think it was in the first months of the war, that was legitimately assassinated by the Ukrainian Special Services Brigade in Russia. Apparently they were going after her father, but she got in the car instead, so she was the one that got assassinated by a bomb in the vehicle. Russians were very, angry about that, but at that time they didn't take any actions. When you see all of these things start to pile up, the risk that Russia does something rash and escalates here is high right now, and that is my big concern, because I've seen some of the Russian commentators on Telegram speculating about the range of things that it may be, and they say, "Hey, how about we follow the Israeli example?" Because when they went after their terrorists in Palestinian areas of Gaza, they just ignored everything. Anywhere they said that there was any possibility of someone associated with Hamas, associated with October 7th, they wiped it out. Whether they were in a hospital, a school, any kind of public building, an apartment, nothing was off limits. They went after everything. We should do the same thing. And whoever it turns out to did this, we should take them out personally. And others have suggested maybe some of the members of the Ukrainian parliament, some of their FSB, their version of the FSB buildings in Kiev. So there's a lot of places that this could escalate, because you've seen that Russia has been really stepping up their ballistic missile strikes and tactical missile strikes throughout the depth of Ukraine, and their ability to knock these things down is going smaller and smaller as Russia continues to take out their air defense systems, to continue to deplete their interceptor missiles. And they've been striking more and more military targets and energy infrastructure designed to weaken the Ukrainian military. It would not take much for them to change that targeting into something else and claim justification for this. And if that starts to happen, it's very unclear what the reaction is going to be from the United States, from Europe, and from much of the rest of the world, because there has been a situation where the U.S. turned a blind eye and said that Israel could do whatever it wanted inside there in the just operation going after their enemies in the Gaza Strip, no matter the cost and the consequence of the Palestinian people. So you can see where there may be a willingness on some of the Russian side to say, we're going to do the same thing. And the U.S. can't say anything because they just condoned it. There is now a precedence for that. That is one of the dangers here, that this could escalate, and that the Russians may feel less constrained about worrying about a Western reaction because of what they had seen happen in the Israeli case. So it remains to be seen how this is going to play out. But I'm very concerned about the risk of this war escalating, because then the question is going to be, then what? What is the Ukraine side going to do in response? What is the West backers going to do in response if that kind of attack starts happening? Because though many don't like to hear it, Russia has been relatively restrained in their operations here. They could have gone much further. They could have specifically attacked large areas of civilian population, not as collateral damage or not as some of the bombs that have gone off course or whatever, but a direct and concentrated attack on civilian areas, which they have not done up to this point. But all bets are off right now. There's no telling what's going to happen, other than the emotions are just percolating right now inside of Russia. Lots of anger is building up. The more people hear about this, the more people look at what Putin said right before this happened. I bet that's going to come up in there. They're all going to be looking to him to make some kind of, like George Bush kind of commentary, like he did on the rubble of 9/11, of the Twin Towers when that happened. You may recall how motivating that was to everybody, because he talked tough and we're coming after you. You're either with us, you're against us, those kinds of things in the immediate aftermath, and then launched that war. Then launched a war against Iraq in 2003, so 2 years later. All of that spawned off of that attack there. So the possibilities here are really, really worrisome to me. We'll see where it's going to go. You can count us. We're going to continue to give you updates on this as it happens, as we get more news out of Washington, out of Moscow, out of Kiev, wherever it may come from. Anything related to this that has anything to do with where this is going, you can count on Daniel Davis Deep Dive giving you the information here. Definitely subscribe and like this video here to make sure that you get the continued updates here. And we are going to have our normal thing of, we're going to be unintimidated and uncompromised. I'm going to bring you the truth no matter what it is. If it goes someplace we don't like, we're going to go there. If it goes someplace the Russians don't like, we're going to go there too, because I don't care about any of that. I care about accuracy, what's really going on the ground, like we say in nearly every episode here. You can count on more of the same. Thanks, and we will see you next time on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.